All right. With our last speakers of the day, we are actually now moving from concepts to labels and designations. Felix Domke from Germany is a political scientist and the head of public affairs at the European Vegetarian Union, Europe's umbrella organization for vegan and vegetarian associations and societies. The EVU puts vegetarian issues on the European political agenda with a focus on the labeling of plant-based products. With him on stage will be, in a minute, Julia Schneider, head of the V-Label Germany. She manages sales and quality management of the V-Label here in Germany, and she initially led the EU project Vegucation, which was aiming to improve cooking education for chefs and caterers on plant-based nutrition. Since 2013, she's been organizing the VegMed Fair for plant-based nutrition and medicine. Now, a warm welcome to the two, all the way from Berlin. Schnappt euch ein Mikrofon.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me all right? Yeah? All right, yeah, thanks for staying. I know it's been a really, really long day with a lot of information. And we are the last ones standing in between you and your glass of wine afterwards. But we wanted to introduce you to the joy of food labeling. So we hope it's going to be interesting for you guys. My name is Felix Domke, and I work for both ProVeg and the European Vegetarian Union. And I'm going to tell you a tiny bit more about the EVU. It's the umbrella organization of European veggie organizations. We have more than 30 members. We issue position papers on several political topics. Please visit our websites. And as said before, we put veggie issues onto the European political agenda. Oh, and we also initiated the V-Label, which my colleague Julia is going to talk about in a second. We work on two main food labeling topics. First one being the definition of the terms vegan and vegetarian for food labeling, because there is no legally binding definition to date, which is a big problem, and sales denominations, my topic of today. Sales denominations, in other words, how to name a plant-based product on its package. So bear in mind that actually plant-based alternatives have been on the market for decades, plant-based meat and dairy alternatives, and as many of them have been developed and produced to resemble the original, so to speak, they are often marketed under similar sales denominations, such as vegan sausage. So, of course, initially we should ask the question, why should we use meaty or milky names for these products? Why call the meat-free sausage sausage? Well, it sounds kind of stupid, but in short, because food labeling matters. It influences and guides people's consumption decisions, right? And we want to make it as easy, attractive, and accessible for people to make their own decisions and to choose plant-based products. And part of that is the most helpful food labeling, obviously. When you look at a product now, like the original and the alternative, obviously there's one main difference, whether or not the product contains meat. Clear. But apart from that, there are many similarities. For example, if you take this delicious, or I don't know how delicious it is, vegan schnitzel, it's round, it has a coating, the taste is salty, you fry it in a pan and you will eat it with a sandwich or with fries, right? And all of this information is transported simply by labeling it with the word schnitzel. So you could say that traditional and well-known sales denominations convey important information on what consumers actually can expect of a product. As a result, these denominations guide consumers' purchase decisions in a useful way, and I think this is the most helpful food labeling we can find. But of course, nothing in life is for free. There are two requirements. The first one, the plant-based characteristic has to be communicated clearly on the packaging. Why? Because clear communication is in everybody's interest. Customers want to know what they are buying, and the fact that a product is plant-based is an important sales argument nowadays. Customers buy those products simply because they want to find them. And second, only if the alternative product is sufficiently similar, the usage of the traditional name makes sense for consumers, because in other words, like a piece of unprocessed tofu should not be marketed as a vegan sausage because it would not meet the expectations fueled by the sales denomination. So now it's getting a little bit complicated. That's a very short overview of the legal situation at European level. What is and what is not allowed depends on the sector. In the case of meat alternatives, the use of meaty names, as we call them, is generally allowed due to the fact that there are only a few specific regulations in place. But as you might have noticed, this topic is currently heavily contested and debated. At European level, the Food Information to Consumers Regulation is what establishes general principles, requirements, and responsibilities with regards to food labeling. And the core principle is that food information shall not be misleading as to the characteristics of the food. And as most of you know, it's up to the food business operator to find an appropriate name. In some cases, there is product-specific legislation in place, such as Regulation 1151, which establishes product protection schemes, such as the protected designations of origin. What does it mean? For example, under union law, specific terms are protected, such as ham from Parma. For these products, you will not find a plant-based alternative under such a name, or at least it's not legally allowed. Regulation 1308 is what establishes the common organization of the market for agricultural products. And the most famous part in our veggie world is the milk terminology. It's the legal basis for the prohibition of dairy sales denominations for milk alternatives. This regulation so far does not include similar provisions for the meat sector, but a lot of rather conservative high-level politicians and interest groups are asking for similar restrictions for meat products and have pressed the European Commission to act on this. One famous and very vocal opponent here has been the former Federal Minister of Food and Agriculture here from Germany, Christian Schmidt. It's actually one of his press photos. Yeah, he took a strange interest in the topic. I mean, it was all over the newspapers, as if he would have had nothing else to do. He called vegan and vegetarian meat alternatives with these meaty names completely misleading and favored them being banned in the interest of clear consumer labeling. And what he did was he wrote to the European Commission and asked for the inclusion of meat terminology within the regulation 1308, which I just mentioned. And the Commission answered, in short, currently we're not planning to do that, there's no need. And the Commission also answered that it considers the applicable provisions provide sufficient legal basis to protect consumers from being misled. But as you all know, there will be an election in May. And what about the next Commission? We don't know what's going to happen. So it's going to continue to be an interesting topic. Because nothing so far has happened at European level, some member states issued national regulations. In Germany, it's super complicated. The responsible institution is called German Food Code Commission, and they issue national guidelines. They are not binding, but super relevant at national level. They just published a guideline on vegetarian alternatives, and the result are super complicated rules. For example, you will be able to label your product as vegan sausage, but vegan salami would have to be changed to something like vegan tofu sausage salami style. And so generic terms such as burger and schnitzel are still allowed. The debate will not stop here, that's for sure, because neither consumers nor producers seem to be happy with the rules. And I mean, it's not understandable. You look at them and it's just, there's still some room for discussion, I would say. In France, there was actually also an attempt to include restrictions on product denominations with a proposal of a new food law, but this was recently rejected by the Constitutional Council. So, of course, we should ask the question, what do we know? Do customers actually confuse these products? Of course, that's a relevant first step to ask, right? And as far as I'm aware of, there's only one representative survey which has been conducted by the Federation of German Consumer Organizations. And they found out that only 4% of German customers have ever unintentionally bought a vegetarian product instead of a meat product, or the other way around. And I think that's a very low figure that one would likely see in the case of other foods that more or less resemble each other. And I think it's not a surprisingly high number, to put it that way. So now let's take a look at the dairy segment, which has super strict regulations. The core problem can be found here in the regulation 1308 Annex 7 Part 3, which states milk means exclusively the normal mammary secretion obtained from one or more milkings without either addition thereto or extraction therefrom. There are similar definitions for cheese, yogurt, and so on. So that simply means that the regulation forbids the use of terms such as milk and cheese for vegan and vegetarian alternatives. Simple as that. The verdict from the European Court of Justice in 2017, you might have heard about that, it confirmed the regulation, and interestingly, those terms are forbidden no matter how clear the explanation is that it's not an animal product, which is ridiculous, of course. Currently, there are court cases debating the question whether alternative to dairy and similar sales denominations are legal. So you would use alternative to milk instead of soya milk. There's no definite answer yet. It's still a struggle, and you see this pretty much has nothing to do with the reality of what customers understand or don't understand. And to make it even more complicated, the court pointed towards the little-known list of exceptions. So basically, European Union member states can request the inclusion of certain terms by addressing the European Commission. This applies to products the exact nature of which is clear from traditional usage, and or when the designations are clearly used to describe a characteristic quality of the product. Sounds good, right? But taking a look at the list, it's pretty confusing to try to grasp why certain terms are allowed and others are forbidden. What is the problem? The last update happened around 10 years ago. So it's kind of out of touch with reality. For example, we try to make the products anonymous. So the term coconut milk would be allowed in many member states, but soya milk isn't. Even though normal customers would refer to it, I guess, as soya milk instead of soya drink. So why not write it on the packaging? And I don't know, what do you write on your shopping list, right? So to sum up, it's safe to say that sales denominations for plant alternatives are a difficult playground. And the discussions will continue because from our perspective, certain restrictions are simply out of touch with the reality of European consumers. And I guess they are obstructing plant-based food producers who are one of the most exciting segments of the European food landscape. Simple as that. So we'll continue the struggle, kind of. As said before, it's very important that the vegan or vegetarian characteristic of the product is clearly labeled, and by saying that, I'm handing over to my colleague Julia.
Yeah, thank you very much, Felix, for the last handover, and I'm happy to share the last 15 minutes with you and have some pleasurable time with the lively topic of labeling. Perfect topic for the last 15 minutes, I think. However, I want you to imagine already now, maybe later you're gonna have some wine or some juice in some networking or some Feierabend occasion. And how will you say that your drinking is vegan? Yes, it's right. You can't say it's vegan because usually on wine, for example, there is not even an ingredients list. And the fact that hidden animals like processing aids like gelatin are used and they don't need to be on ingredients list, so you probably cannot say if a wine that you're drinking is actually vegan. But there is a possibility how to show that a product is actually vegan, and that's by voluntary labeling. So you have heard some of the legal requirements of my colleague Felix, and what I'm going to dig deeper into is a voluntary labeling that you can do as a producer or a company to put on your products for different reasons. So you heard a lot of vegan and vegetarian. I'm sure you know what vegan is, so I'm not going to explain to you, but I just want to go back once back in history and show you what the first vegan definition actually was. And it was quite pragmatic, as you see. It says, it's a philosophy and a way of living which seeks to exclude as far as possible and practicable all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and any other purpose. So it clearly says as far as possible and practical. So it doesn't say, yeah, vegan is only what is 200% vegan and free of all traces, and I don't know, also the processing stages of 100 years ago was already vegan, or the dinosaurs were also vegan, I don't know. But it's a very pragmatic approach. So this is also where the definition that Felix already mentioned is based on. So there is not yet a binding legal definition, but there is at least a proposal that has been voted for by the Consumer Protection Conference of Ministers of the German Federal States, or yeah, in a beautiful German term said Verbraucherschutzministerkonferenz from April 2016. You can look that up. It's a very pragmatic approach and a very good proposal where traces are allowed. I will just say something about that in a minute. And this definition is already used by official food controls, as well as it is the basis for the V-label criteria, and it is like, yeah, mostly our approach too. So this is the definition. I will not read it out to you because, yeah, maybe then you gonna sleep, or it's a legal text, so you can read it later. Also, it's available online. So the definition, yeah, differentiates between vegan and vegetarian in a way that it says vegan is free of everything free of animal origin, blah, 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 on all processing stages, obviously. And vegetarian is the same, but it has some exceptions, and these exceptions are listed below. And also it has a article about traces, which says that traces are, let's say, allowed or not contradictory to the vegan term as long as they are technically unavoidable, and if precautions are being in place, and if the manufacturer really takes care that his quality management system is in good manufacturing practice compliance. So that's also a very pragmatic approach, because otherwise we wouldn't have any vegan or vegetarian products. So we had the question, I think the past year, if the term vegan deters consumers when they read it on a packaging. And talking about labeling, and like you see our label, sorry, for all the smartphone lovers here, just saying like this label that I'm talking about, I mean, it's very like, it's, wow, yeah, here it is, like yellow and very ugly and very greenish. So it is very clear, which is good. But on the other side, now, yeah, okay. It's a very funny picture. I wish I could post you. Yeah, does it scare people off? Is often the question. So here was a study just recently published on Faunalytics. You can easily find it online. It's a wonderful study trying out different names for alternative products, and also comparing vegan and plant-based. So you can see like the terms vegan sounds much better than plant-based, or vegan sounds a bit better, or they sound about equal, are 3/3 of this cake here. So the fear of naming things vegan is probably not so super true, but plant-based can of course be a good alternative for some products. But I will tell you something about it also later. But also just to say, it is a preferred term, and also we recommend to be clear about the terms because also vegan, vegetarian has this definition proposal behind it. On the other side, consumers are generally very, very skeptic about information on packaging. So telling you what you can do legally or do in marketing aspects to promote your products, consumers are generally very critical and dissatisfied with information on packaging. They say food is often better represented on the packaging than it is in reality. They do not trust the information, or it is not understandable. Maybe it's too complex or it's too much information. And they're also losing faith. So what to do? Just stop making any products? No. What can we do to build trust or to make maybe information clearer and to gain trust? Of course, I'm talking about voluntary labeling. So I'm going to tell you, yes, there's no legally binding definition, and it doesn't, like the list of ingredients does not give sufficient information, and also it is often not understood. Also hidden animals in the production process can be additionally possible. So consumers cannot see at first glance if a product is actually suitable for the vegetarian lifestyle, and a labeling can help, or a clear communication on it. We have found in studies that especially the vegetarian group knows the label very well, and also consumers, flexitarians and omnivores, trust and know the label up to 70%. We have basically the same criteria as the definition, but we found that the expectations of our target group are even higher. So we have a few other criteria additionally to them. So we check, of course, the products on a check form basis with specification forms, etc., etc. But we also check that no GMO products are involved. We check that no animal testing is being done on the end product. We also do annual inspections on the production side. We check if there is a quality management ensured, and optionally we also check the used ingredients and additives. So that's what we do to ensure quality and to make sure that our customers, like the V-label customers, are criteria compliant. And I'm going to show you some good examples or just a variety on how packaging and labeling can work. So what do you think what this product is? Okay, you can read it, but I think it's very innovative. It looks like some outer space product. It's actually coffee. It's called coffee, and you see, do we have a pointer here? Yeah, here. You see, they used a monochrome version of the V-label, very, very, almost invisible, very beautiful. It really goes with the design very well. And I think a person would buy it no matter if it's vegan or not. I mean, it wouldn't be scared off, but also it can find the information on the back side that it's vegan, right? Here, another example that's it's a vegetable sauce, kind of, ready-made sauce. And you see that the V-label, the labeling is put here on the side, so not directly in front, but still in the original colors. And it goes well with the coloring and the design, I think, and it really fits to this kind of, to this food understanding of this product. So this is also a possibility. Here it's rather directly placed, and I think this is more a very conservative design. Not so modern, but also it goes well with other labels. For example, here is an organic label right beside it. And someone can easily find if this chocolate is suitable for my lifestyle or not. Here we have a cosmetic product, and you must imagine, like in your fantasy, this is the this is the front package, right? So these are the sides. So this customer has decided to just put it on the side. So if a consumer just grabs it, and then you can also easily find that it's vegan. And another cosmetic product, it's already on the front here, and it's along with another label. But it easily goes with this design, and I know that this company, they were thinking about using the monochrome version, which is totally possible, but then in the end they decided to have it in a coloring. And here's a wine example. Like this goes together. This is the back etiquette, and this is the front side. You see here they used the monochrome version beside the monochrome bio-organic label, and then on the back they have the real, like the full colored version. This is also super possible, and is very easy for customers to find if this wine is suitable for them or not. And here another example in a colored version with another label, or also in a monochrome version on the front page. I think these are very good examples on how actually the design is very attractive and nice to look at, and you would catch it, but on the other side it also doesn't deter anyone. So our recommendations would be like on a very prior one is a design or product should be attractive to a mainstream audience. The products shouldn't just target vegetarian or vegan audience, but also flexitarians, nuditarians, just because it's more people that you're addressing. Consumer want to buy good feelings, so the design should address this need in design and wording. Like it should transfer safety, environment, health, prestige, like depending on which target group you have. So these are more like the main prerequisites I would recommend. And then the third point, clear labeling and clear communication, we find very important on the front or back side. It's optional. It depends on your design and your decision. As additional information, but clear, like easily findable, and in the clear terms that we would recommend vegan or vegetarian, but plant-based works as an alternative, especially in an English-speaking environment, and depending on the target group. So this will be my conclusion. Shall I just sum it all up, or do you have some last words? No? Felix is super happy sitting there. Okay, so this is also your points, right? Like I'm summing up your points too, as an extra service. No, so we had both sides, right? We had legal framework and the labeling, what is actually possible, and we had the marketing and design aspects now in our little talk. So labeling is an opportunity to gain transparency and trust beyond the ingredient list when there is any, let's say. The V-label is a possibility to gain trust, and because it's a widely known label and we have quality criteria and processes in place. Labeling anyway in terms of like voluntary labeling or the denominations should be easy, attractive, accessible for people to make their own decisions. So you should use well-known sales denominations. And as Felix said before, vegetarian characteristics should be communicated clearly and be sufficiently similar to the original. And talking about marketing and design aspects, consumers unfortunately often distrust packaging and information, and they have very complex needs and perceptions in different consumer groups. So our recommendation, as my last word, making products so attractive to buy, no matter how vegan they are, and add information about their characteristics clearly for those who care. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix and Julia. Any questions on this talk, on this insight? No one has any questions? Well, I would have a question. Do you still have a microphone? You do. Okay.
How do you feel about soy gurd? Is that okay?
there is a question.
Well,
Should we repeat the question because maybe people over there couldn't hear it?
how I feel about soy good was the question. I feel it would
Where
be.
do you feel it?
I feel it in my stomach after I eat it. Yeah, I think it would be a helpful type of labeling. Whether it's legally allowed, I can't say that. I'm not a lawyer. For sure, there's going to be a debate on this name. I mean, alternative to milk, whether that's allowed or not, I mentioned it. It kind of poses the question whether the combination of the letters which form the word milk are allowed or not, because clearly if you write this is not milk or alternative to milk, every reasonable person should understand it, right? So I guess that soy good would maybe not be allowed if somebody would sue your company, but it's hard to say, you know, and if that makes any sense to anybody, it's a totally different question. It's complicated.
No risk,
Sorry
no
for the
fun.
confusing answer.
No, but it's no risk, no fun, right? We'll find out whether, sooner or later.
Do you sell soy good?
No.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't see any more questions. Thank you very, very much for that insight on the legal framework. And that were our last speakers for the day. Big warm round of applause for Felix and Julia. Yeah. And with that, we are actually concluding our first day, Jeroen, right? It was, you can stay sad. You can also give us your feedback on the day if you like. It was a very complete day. And how do you feel about it? What was your best takeaway, Jeroen?
This was studied, by the way. I knew she was going to ask this question, so I had a little time to think it over. And I finally came to this finding. This is the New Food Conference. But if there's one thing that I learned today about meat successors, fish successors, dairy successors, is that it's perhaps not so much new or of the future. So I would summarize today not so much as the New Food Conference, but the Now Food Conference.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Right.
I'm really looking forward to tomorrow, because that might be a different conclusion at the end of the day. But for today, for me, this was really an exciting Now Food Conference day.
Totally. I can only agree. And I think it was also interesting to have some controversy. And it's also interesting to just see every side, like different perspectives on one issue. It's just interesting to hear people out. And that's what I think also rounded this day off. So what are you looking forward to tomorrow?
Well, tomorrow I'm really looking forward to hearing the other protein-forward movement,
Yeah.
which is the cultured meat, clean meat, cell-based meat. Perhaps we'll have a little discussion about the naming as well tomorrow. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. And it'll be, most of you will be here, most likely, and perhaps some of you may not. So those who will not be here tomorrow, really thank you as well for joining us today.
One point about exactly about cell-based meat. We are starting with Dr. Mark Post tomorrow morning, so don't be late. And talking about late, we'd like to invite you all for an evening of networking now down here at the Kalkscheune, which will go roughly until 9 p.m. And dear speakers of the day, we would also like to thank you all for your great insight, you and all the other speakers present right here now. Maybe one more applause for all the speakers and all their insight that they were sharing with us.